to this last session, last but not least, Markets in Motion. And I would say that we're going to continue the journey of exploring the roles that digital and spatial technologies can play in innovating future markets and sustainable societies. And the idea behind the title of this session, Markets in Motion, is that when we're innovating for an uncertain and changing future, innovation activities are not just the activities that innovate the technology. The innovation activities actually innovate or create the market at the same time. Okay? Are you with me on that? Innovation activities are the activities that not only innovate the technology, but make the market for that technology at the same time. Okay? So welcome. I'm Lotta, Charlotta Windahl, from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. I'm originally Swedish, so that's my accent. Okay? Bienvenue à tous. Okay. And with me today, I'm delighted to have 4 distinguished members of the community here at EPFL. So we've got Luciano, Dr. Luciano Abriata, who's a senior scientist at the Laboratory for Biomolecular Modeling and at the Protein Structure Core Facility at EPFL. We've also got Professor Edouard Bugnion, who's professor at EPFL and a board member of the Swiss Innovation Agency, InnoSwiss, and also an entrepreneur in a previous life. Was that right? Yes. And we got Dr. Giezendanner-Thoben, who's Director of Industry Affairs at the Vice Presidency for Innovation at EPFL Innovation Park. And we also got Giovanni Landi, who's the Head of XR Design at CREAL. Yeah. And they'll talk a bit more about themselves in the presentations. So the idea here is we have got a really broad expertise in the room, and drawing on their experience spanning private, public, and academic contexts, the panel will share specific projects and personal journeys. And the way the session will be run is that I will introduce myself and talk a bit about my research and interest, and specifically the collaboration I have with Uwe and Yinan. And I'm stealing the floor a little bit in the beginning, just because I've come all the way from New Zealand. You're going to get to hear a little bit about me and the research that I've been involved in. And then the other panel members will get to introduce themselves and their projects, organizations, and roles, and talk a little bit more about what they do. And this session, it's a roundtable, so it's going to be a bit quicker, the presentations, than from the previous sessions. And we're hoping we're going to have some time towards the end to continue the discussion and possibly involving you, the audience, as well in that discussion. I often introduce myself as an engineer who's ended up in the business school, and specifically, currently I'm in the Department of Marketing. And the reason for this, I say, are because of the difficulties, or the market-related difficulties, many companies and organizations face when innovating. Okay? And I guess there's no secret that many new product development projects fail or are discontinued, even though they might actually be able to deliver a technical solution. Okay? So in my view, the time has come to rethink some of the traditional assumptions we make about markets and how to engage with them. And my intention with the next few minutes is to take you on my own, what I now call marketization journey. Okay? And before I start, I'm going to just show you where we will end up. And some of you were perhaps introduced to this in the morning if you were here hearing Uwe talk. This is XR2 Revolution. And we can see here how a hybrid space, a cyber-physical design, it's based on Uwe and Yinan's research, turned a data visualization problem into a research collaboration tool. So addressing both visual as well as social, spatial, and temporal dimensions. And I'd like to acknowledge the researchers as well as the patient and the patient's family in this project. They are the ones that have enabled my active participation during the past 2 years. And it's a project that involves a number of faculties and centres from the University of Auckland, such as the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences, School of Architecture and Planning, Windahl, and the Centre for E-Research. And this project represents scientific discovery processes that wasn't a market to begin with, and it isn't a market as of yet. Okay? I want to make that clear. Instead, I see it brings together a plurality of values. For some, being part of this is part of an architectural and digitalization inquiry. For others, it's a clinical treatment and genetic inquiry linked to tumor evolutions. And for me, it's been a marketization journey so far. And so today, I'm going to be sharing some early and preliminary findings and thinking in relation to how the project connects across a number of important marketization practices. And for me, before I do this, I'm just going to explain where I'm coming from. Okay, so for me, it started here with what we came to call technology-driven solutions. And if you look at the companies involved, you'll see that most of them are industrial engineering companies operating in the business-to-business context. And back in the early 2000s, many of them saw opportunities linked to using new software, sensors, and computing technologies to optimize and create efficiency in the equipment that they sold to factories and process plants. Not very different from some of the rhetoric we're hearing today about what digital can do for us. And what they did is that they created new business models where they could sell performance or a service rather than products. So for example, Alfa Laval here optimized the dewatering process of sludge in the wastewater treatment plants and started selling percentage dewatered sludge instead of a decanter through various license agreements, etc. This wasn't easy, okay? The sales process became more complicated and strategic. Some operators of the equipment felt threatened. Sales and service departments had to collaborate internally. They weren't used to that. If you're going to a manufacturing company, the sales department don't want to talk to service because their products never fail. Okay, so it was quite tricky for them. And externally, some of the sub-suppliers, such as the polymer suppliers, felt threatened because their business were kind of decreasing because they were optimizing the use of the products. Now, it was these non-technical challenges that made me interested in companies that seem to use completely different tools to understand the markets, so-called design methods for business innovation purposes. And going through today, these tools and methods have been used for designers and architects for many years. But about 15 years back, they started finding their way into business management, I would say. And when I met the innovation team at Air New Zealand back in 2010, they had just finished a project where they had shadowed passengers on long-haul flights, done empathy interviews, and prototyped full-sized airplanes where they brought actors in to stay overnight. And in a sense, they had stepped back from their own product a bit and tried to put the customer in focus, or the customer experience in focus. And in parallel to this, I also investigated companies that were seemingly part of making completely new markets. And here I was specifically interested in the interactions that took place in the wider network. So for example, here we've got Helios, who's a medical cannabis company in New Zealand. They worked for many years with regulating bodies in order to be able to eventually take their product to market. Now, why am I telling you all this? Okay, what is this about? And I'd like to just show you that this is the reason why, when I met Giovanni quite a few years back now, it was a perfect fit. Okay? You believe me? It was a perfect fit? No? Why was it a perfect fit? Well, it turns out they are real designers and architects. Design inquiry is core to what they do and who they are. Okay? So instead of kind of getting knowledge about the toolkits that some businesses use, I got to meet and interact with real designers and architects. They work at the edge of what is possible technology-wise, but here it was not about optimizing or increasing efficiency. In my words, I don't know if they would agree to this, but it's about rethinking the way we act and interact. in our environment, our practices. Okay? So it's not about increasing efficiency and optimizing. And they approach space and the physical room in a way that resonates with how I approach markets. So rooms are not just there to fit into or to put furniture into. Okay? Instead, the room changes and is changed by the interactions taking place between the digital, the physical, and the human. So they work between and across situated and systemic interactions in their work. Okay? And this really interested me in terms of what's happening here when we're making markets. Okay, so just to share some specifics related to 3 ongoing and interconnecting what I call marketization activities in this XR tumor evolution project. First, we can see how the project so far is connecting purposes and intents in the value-creating network. So, interestingly here, we have a patient that was crucial to this project even starting. She insisted on donating her body with 90 tumors in it for research purposes before she died. And this was normally the medical practitioner or the clinicians wouldn't take that type of material from a patient if they can't have a treatment plan for it. So her and her family, they were adamant that we want to do this. Okay? We want the body to be used for research purposes. And we also had a clinician who's a researcher as well, with a strong commitment to cure cancer. Okay? So he had his purpose for engaging in this. We had a genetic expert researching tumor evolution during her PhD. We had cyber-physical designers and architects applying their research in a real context. And we had a metaverse rhetoric in the wider context, emphasizing the importance of spatial computing and the need to explore the physical in a new way. And in a sense, the project is performing this rhetoric, okay, that's currently going on and that we're part of today here during this symposium. And I would say that the project's continuous journey here will depend on how it connects with new purposes and new actors coming in. We're currently in discussions with Sectra, who's a big imaging company using this for educational purposes, possibly. So what we have here is also, we got an unfolding of evaluations and technologies. So the participants from the med school re-evaluated the need. They thought initially that they needed something to visualize really complex data. They wanted a video fly-through or something. They met Uwe and Yinan, and they realized, no, actually, we need a tool to collaborate and communicate across disciplines. So it changed from visualizing data and communicating data to collaborating through visualizing. And there's an ongoing discussion here in terms of the value it creates linked to education. Okay? There's also an unfolding of technologies. I think it's important to point out that this was actually not a technology-driven project. Okay? In fact, it started off experimenting and doing the first kind of proof of concept with HoloLens 1. It was not good enough for what they wanted to achieve. So unless HoloLens 2 had been released on the market, this project would have been discontinued. Am I right? Yeah, kind of nodding. So in a sense, they're pushing the boundaries of what technology can't do, and therefore what it should do in the future. I think there's something key in that here when we're talking about what we can do with technology. And finally, then I'll stop. I just wanted to recognize how this has been all orchestrated through what I call design inquiry, and there's lots we could talk about here. But I want to specifically point out the role of the tactile vision early on. Okay? It wasn't set in stone, but the vision that Uwe and Yinan had, we can see it through early renderings, images of the room, and eventually creating this hybrid room has had a big role in catalyzing collective collaboration and engagement, both with the core team, but also with people outside the team. So other industry partners coming in, other medical doctors coming in from different fields, starting to engage and create communication around what the possibilities are for the future. So the market is not out there waiting for XRTM. Instead, XRTM performs it throughout the process. The market is in the making. That's me. Now I'm going to leave the floor to the other panel members, and we are going to start with Dr. Luciano Abriata. Okay, thank you.
For the invitation. There will be not really any marketing in my talk, but I want to show you what we do in the lab, especially in a line of research that I lead, where all the work was done by Fabio Cortés. We are at the Alperaro lab. What we do in this line of research is to develop tools to work with molecules, also to assist education in chemistry, in biology, with modern human-computer interactions, okay? And a special twist in the way we do these things is that we do everything web-based. We'll be very quick, but all these ideas are surrounding the metaverse, and there's a lot of hype there, but one important thing is that one of the aspects of the metaverse has to do with augmented reality and virtual reality, which allows us to immerse ourselves in data and structures, which is essentially what helps us when we do research in chemistry and biology to understand the objects that we look at, manipulate more efficiently. Especially, there's a lot of work that you do when you work with molecules in the computer on a flat screen with a mouse, and it's really painful, literally. You get your wrist all going bad. And there's a lot of 3D visualization that you essentially do in 2D. So we really want to capitalize on augmented reality, virtual reality, and other human-computer interaction technologies to make this happen better, more efficiently, hopefully do better work, be better at teaching, learning faster, etc. So as I told you, we do everything for the web. Why? Because essentially, if I do something for the web, it means that I can run it on this computer just by accessing a web page. I don't need to install anything, set up anything, etc. Then I can grab my phone and I have a web browser here. I can use the same, literally the same piece of code here. And even these kind of devices, they have a web browser there, so I can use them as well. And each device will have different capabilities that I can exploit. For example, with this, I can track my hands, and I can do super cool and advanced molecular manipulation. Now, our first work was in the creation of this website that has several activities and playgrounds to assist students in doing, students and teachers in chemistry at the end of the high school and the beginning of the university levels. This uses the webcam of your computer or smartphone or tablet, etc. And essentially what we allow with these activities here in this website is to control molecules with markers like this. This is printed in plastic. This was a professor from Belgium who sent me this example. But in principle, you can also just print this, fold it, and then you can interact with the molecule on the computer. I can show you all this very easily. You can even run it on your devices because, as I told you, it's web, so it's immediate. Here's a paper. We have some other papers explaining the kind of things that teachers and students can do here. You can simulate molecules. You can see how the molecules move. You can have two of these and then make molecules interact as well. It's all a very welcome thing in the community. So in 3 years, we got more than over 80,000 accesses. All our website is free online. You don't even need to register. You just access and use it. It's ready in 8 languages, and because it's web, it's very easy to change language and adapt it. Actually, there's a lot of usage from Thailand because a professor from there sent us the translation. That's why we added there. We added it to the website. And as I told you, we do everything for the web, and including for VR headsets, or the headsets also like the HoloLens. I like this one better because it's $350 today versus, I think, $2,000-3,000 for the HoloLens. But okay, the point is that with this, you go much more immersive than with the computer or with the phone, and this tracks your hands. So you can do things like point at something, and everybody can be looking at you, seeing what you're pointing at, You can grab molecules and move them with your head, with your hand, etc. Now, for example, here we developed a multi-user virtual reality app that runs in the web browser of these devices. Here we are applying this in a conference that took place in Bern last year. There were some normal talks, and there were some talks that happened in VR. Okay, so here you have 5 people. There's one person here in the back, so, who see each other in this virtual world, and you see how this person is pointing at an interface here between these are 2 proteins. And you see how natural it is to point at something and everybody's seeing what you are doing. Users could also grab the molecules, pass them on, etc. Here we are using that same system during the Port2Vert event. So it's an outreach event that happens at EPFL every 3-4 years. In this case, this person is navigating all the other assistants through this virtual reality session where she was teaching about chemistry, physics, biology, etc. Then here, this that you see here is my view inside one of these VR headsets, sitting or standing in my room here in Switzerland. And the guy in blue is a guy that's in Argentina teaching chemistry, in particular something that has to do with the elements of symmetry in molecules, something very difficult really to see in 2D, but much easier to see in 3D. He was teaching this to his students, and I could just jump in from 11,000 kilometers away. So that was a short presentation. All this work is funded mainly by the SNF. We also have some help from the Hassler Stiftung, and money from intramural funding as well. You can follow us on Twitter. We are very active, always showing these things that we do. These are our collaborators, and and then we can discuss. If you want to try anything, I have everything here eventually. Thank you.
So during these amazing sessions of the symposium, it was pretty clear that from the sessions of this symposium that the link between physical spaces and the digital, let's call them spaces, is to go beyond screens. At CREAL, we are developing an evolution of an enabling display technology for the next generation of augmented reality glasses. So we are enabling a better device for a non yet existing scenario, but that could be a massive paradigm shift, that it's the spatial computing revolution. So where information will be, will stay, will be used and interacted with beyond screens. So CREAL is a company that is hosted by the EPFL Innovation Park. We are a team of pioneers and specialists coming from different backgrounds, because the topic is highly transdisciplinary. Me, myself, I've been working for 10 years in the museum space, and that's how I got to know Sarah Kenderdine. And what we are developing is a display technology that provides real depth perception. We are agreeing on changing our definition toward retinal light field projection display. But what we are trying to do is to go beyond this paradigm. Right now, every wearable head-mounted displays just put 2 screens in front of the user eye and then rely on our ability to perceive depth through stereo. But this is highly unhealthy. Even if it's exciting to experiment with these early prototypes, it's super uncomfortable and simply is blocking the acceptance of spatial computing devices. So the discomfort comes mainly from a conflict that is usually called vergence accommodation conflict, that is the conflict between 2 reflexes that we have while perceiving depth. While our 2 eyes in combination, they are able to converge toward a close object. And we can trick them by showing them offset images, and that provide the illusion, it's just an optical illusion, of an object in the convergence point of those rays. But our eye is really difficult to trick, and we go toward a focal rivalry, because also a single eye is able to act as a camera and perceive depth through a focus shift. And this leads to the divergence accommodation conflict that affects mainly all the hardware in the market. I will skip to, so this is what the industry is giving to the users right now. So 2 flat screens providing a stereo image. This is what we want to provide to the users, a fully 3-dimensional image. An image, a stream of information that contains all the information, all the data that your eye are able to decode in order to perceive depth. Okay. I will close by showing you some footage shot through our optical engine. It's not this, but this shows the divergence accommodation conflict, because this is what you expect to be able to do with digital content, and this is what we provide. You see, the content is very present. It shares the giraffe shares the focus with the hands of the user, and now we rotate the gear of the camera and we focus on the grass, and the giraffe and the hands, they go out of focus. Here we have a stacked series of planets, and we can shift the focus back and forth. And you see how the content is highly present and vivid, and this is because we mimic how the eye of humans work.
Hello everybody, also from my side. So Robert Giezendanner. I'm working at the Vice President of Innovation, the interface between industry and academia. And we are working actually at what is in between 2 worlds. And the 2 worlds are, of course, one side is academia, which is strongly doing research, science, technology, lot of invention, lots of papers, publication. On the other side, we have industry, which is focused on social adoption, which has a market, which has business, and how to transfer what's happening at EPFL in the labs to society, having a positive impact. So how to link these 2 worlds? This is the place, the realm where I'm focused on. We have a lot of elements to put in place. So the Vice President of Innovation has 2 main pillars, which is we are working on. The first pillar is, of course, startups. We are trying to push out technology to the market, creating startups coming out of the lab, and we are working beyond the technology. So we're not working anymore on the technology itself. Sometimes it has 10 or 15 years technological research or a science research on the background. We're doing the part which is just after that, which is about de-risking, design, and maybe also investors, term sheets. So it can last maybe up to 2 years until we think, okay, the technology, the startup is ready to be incorporated, and then it goes out to the market and grows at the EPFL Innovation Park, which is next door. The other pillar is industrial collaboration, which I'm mainly focused on personally. So it's really the element where we try to connect industry to academia, to connect these both worlds, not only to creating startups, but to find other ways of collaboration. And we see more and more, there's not one technology, one science will solve the big problem, but combination. And I can see that EPFL can deliver a lot of elements. We have a lot of students, we have researchers, we have more than 120 nationalities on campus. We're now close to 15,000 students. So close to 20,000 people when you use the EPFL Innovation Park, we count the EPFL Innovation Park with more than 120 nationalities. And if you can catch this in your business, collaborating with this ecosystem, I think there's a lot of value out of it. The idea is really to connect this both worlds with this. And the instrument linked to that, of course, is the EPFL Innovation Park with more than 2,500 people on board. And this is our work, day in, day out, find new ways of collaboration. And we just started to finish our first program. We started 2 years ago, which is called Kainova, which is coming from an astrophysical phenomena called kilonova, which is the fusion of 2 neutron stars. We can imagine really academia and industry colliding together and liberating high-weight materials, which is gold, platinum. And what we're working is really to make this happen, to create this fusion, this collision, to bring new value to the market with positive impact. And I'm happy to have the talk afterwards.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Edouard Bugnion. As was mentioned, I'm a professor at EPFL, but my area of technical expertise is in data center infrastructure. So if you don't know what data center infrastructure is, this is the invisible part of your cell phone, right? Or your VR device, right? It's the things in the very, very big machine rooms that are, the size of a few, a square kilometer at times, that power the web and in general our digital lives. Right? But so that actually has nothing to do with the cyber physical world. This is basically the digital infrastructure that enables the physical world. Right? Google Map operates because of data centers, and because we have Google Maps, then we have a whole set of new modalities in the cyber physical world. But that's not why I was invited. I was invited here because I'm on the board of InnoSwiss, and just to introduce it in a few sentences. So InnoSwiss is the Swiss Innovation Agency. So we are a funding agency. We fund close to 300 million a year in projects. In a very typical Swiss style, these projects are largely selected on a bottom-up basis. We don't have big themes. We have call for proposals on an ongoing basis. And what's unique about InnoSwiss is that there are two applicants. There's an academic applicant and there is an industry applicant. And the money that we award goes to the academic applicant, but the industrial applicant gets IP rights. So this is premised on the fact that there's an IP agreement between the academic applicant and the industrial applicant. And this is quite unique and quite interesting, and it's a way of sort of enabling technology transfer from the academic environment into the industry and back and forth. And it's been extremely interesting instrument. So I'm on the board, so we're responsible for the governance, which means we actually don't make any of the interesting decisions, which is what to fund. We only get to decide who gets to make the decisions. And particularly, we appoint the members of the Innovation Council. And that's another unique aspect of InnoSwiss. It's a very Swiss way of organizing things, which is that all of the decisions are done by effectively a militia system. So these are 25 people that are doing this on a very part-time basis. Some of them are professors at EPFL. Philippe Renaud is a professor at EPFL that's member of the Innovation Council. And the Innovation Council operates in groups, and this group actually decides to fund or not fund projects, right? And we just appoint them, and we do a few other things. I've been on the board for 7 years, and I've seen a number of changes, and I think maybe that's sort of a relevant set of observations to make. One, it's obviously clear that the impact of the need to respond to climate change through technology innovation is becoming absolutely clear and center, right? So this is obviously the challenge of our lifetimes. The solutions will be complex. There's a number of innovative breakthroughs, including in Switzerland, that basically have to do with one way or another sort of slowing down or inverting the carbon cycle that we're in right now. And that actually has led also to not only a number of small projects, but also some flagship projects within InnoSwiss. The other one is, of course, the rise of digital technologies and the importance of digital technologies. Another theme, which is extremely mature, is the importance of life science research and innovation, in particular in Switzerland. And then last but not least, over the past few years, is this obviously phenomenal rise in artificial intelligence. And a lot of the things that are actually possible now are possible because we operate in this world where we've been able to apply a certain set of techniques that have been mathematically sort of designed, perhaps not understood, but designed at small scale many years ago, some of them decades ago. Some of them are more recent, right? But it's the combination of these new techniques with massive computational power that actually has led to these breakthrough results in generative AI. And to the point that we're actually now in a situation where we are unable to reason about facts in the way we were able to in the past, right? Photography used to be the ground truth for 150 years, And then, with, early levels of Photoshop, we were able to do some doctoring. Of course, there was some doctoring of photographs in the past, well documented from propaganda, but this took a huge amount of effort and skills, and now we've sort of commoditized the generation of fake images. And this is just one of the many examples of this disruption that is going extremely fast. And I'll close by citing two different people. It's always good when you're on panels to have a Rolodex of citations you can use, right? One, which is, I'm sure everybody knows, which is, but I think they apply also to the first two presentations. One is known as Amara's Law, right? Which is people overestimate the impact of technology in the near term and underestimate the impact of technology disruption in the long term, right? Absolutely true, right? If you look at the web, for those of us who are the generation that saw the rise of the web and were involved and that in industry and in business at that time, it was overestimated in the near term, completely underestimated in the long term. I think what we're seeing with the cyber-physical convergence, the convergence between sort of the bio world, the nanotechnologies, the digital technologies, and the cyber technologies is obviously overestimating the short term and completely underestimated and actually not understood in the long term, right? So this is Amara's Law. You can look it up. It's everywhere on the web. The other quote, and there's no contradiction between, the first one is a market statement, right? And the market adoption statement. The second one is a product-centric statement, which also goes to your point. And this actually is less known because it's actually from one of my bosses and mentors about 15 years ago, which is timing is everything. And most technology introduction fails because they're too early, right? It's very intuitive that if you're late in the market, then of course you're late in the market, right? Somebody else is there, you're late, right? But in fact, being too early is just as difficult as being too late. Technology is inherently perishable. So now we're in this situation where there is this massive inflection of interest, activity, innovation, funding in certain sort of sectors, in particular at this cyber-physical convergence point. And that getting the timing right is going to be absolutely essential. Getting the ecosystem right is going to be absolutely essential. I look forward to the panel. Thank you.
Okay, so should we start with a little bit of discussion between us and then we open up? Is that right? Yeah, okay. Thank you. I'm honored to be here and to try and moderate this session. We're just meeting for the first time, all of us, so more or less. I'm going to start because we kind of got a strategic and operational almost, if I'm talking my language, looking at the four people. So I'm going to start with Luciano and Giovanni and just ask, when it comes to your technology and what you're doing, do you see, or how do you work with how it might be changing practices of the people that are using it? So in your case, Luciano, I see how you're working with educators, mostly. Is that right? How much kind of interaction? I'm just interested to find out more about those, what the technology is actually doing in terms of their practices. Could you talk about that? Can you need to borrow a mic?
Is it? Yeah. We should interact with teachers more than what we do.
Oh, okay.
It's a problem of time and resources, essentially. We have an automated survey system on the website that users can fill in if they want, and from that we kind of get some statistics about usage, if the users can actually use the activities or not, and then they by making some choices, they give us some information about how they think it's helping them to teach or to learn, okay? The hardest part has been trying to convince teachers that we need to do some kinds of blind tests to actually measure the utility, the impact of this on education. I say this because this is said a lot, like immersive, augmented reality, virtual reality, etc., will help to learn better, but at least in my field, there are very few studies really focusing on that aspect. And yeah, well, articulating that with teachers is not easy. We have tried a few times, but even when they want to do it, the logistics are also not trivial. But I think something that can be addressed by having some specific funds and time and people for that specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll come to the funders soon. Okay, no, okay, thank you. And Giovanni, what about you when it comes to, because you obviously have, I'm assuming you could see your glasses being used across a number of different contexts? Are there some specific?
Right now, no. We are more. We are developing an optical engine that could hopefully be licensed to other manufacturers, players of a market that it's not yet there. So we fight continuously. I mean, timing is super important for us. And personally, I would like, for example, the whole ecosystem to benefit of a good invention like the one we had. And of course, our contribution is to a broader movement of an unstoppable movement of information and data outside of screen and free in the context. So I would like, for example, generation of my son to be able to interact with digital content in a more natural way. Maybe outdoor or not standing on screens for hours like our generation did for decades so far.
So when you're trying to promote this engine, what are the activities that you actually like? Can you talk about that, or is it?
Yes,
like,
sure. Right now we are. I mean, we move in the hardware sector. So we are a team of superstar optical engineers and physicists, and we can show results and features and specifications that honestly no other achieved yet. So right now we are struggling with the fact that the run toward spatial computing slowed down a bit compared to a few years ago. We survived the metaverse hype. We didn't really used it so much, but yes, mainly we talk to people that can deeply understand the value of our product, of our solution, and
so who are those people? I'm digging a bit.
No, it's interesting because we deal with really huge structures that realistically struggle to even to believe that we are a team of 27 people. They say 27, you mean 27,000? No, it's 27. But that's the beauty of having this invention. We are looking for some manufacturing partners that could make our product a reality. And we deal with organizations in which maybe they have 3 different labs and 3 different teams trying to solve the same problem and fighting inside a big tech company for their solution to survive or to have the budget to continue their research in the upcoming years. So we talk with these kind of specialists inside of big tech companies, hoping to convince them and to start some industrial projects together.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to share?
Maybe just to build on what you said. So I started my my first company in the 20th century, right? So this puts me in perspective. And this was an era where there were many routes to market. There were many ways in which technology that would be innovative and disruptive could be brought to the masses. And now the world has changed a little. I think this is exactly what you're describing, right? there is a small number of technology players, especially for anything that is sort of consumer-oriented. And these companies, we all know their names, right? We have one of them in our pockets. They're very small. They're massive companies. And they are incredibly vertically integrated. Right? They do pretty much everything themselves. I had a friend at Google who would say, not only do we reinvent the wheel, we vulcanize our own rubber to put on the tires, right? So these companies are incredibly vertically integrated, and they, in a way, have a lock on the B2C market, right? It's very, very tough to introduce something into the market. You can do this with if you have sort of an obvious, clear value proposition with a relatively low complexity product. What you're describing here is an extremely high complexity component of a fuller, much bigger system, which was what makes the whole go-to-market extremely challenging, right? And this is something that, we've all, the computing industry, the digital industry is extremely used to. It's this notion of like, how many customers do you have, right? Because it could be, 1 billion, right, users, realistically, right? Or it could be the Fortune 500, which is, that's the name of the 500 biggest US companies, but basically these are big companies, right? This is a much smaller set. Or it could be the 4 players in the digital space that may acquire your technology, license your technology in some way, right? And maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6. And this is the question that you need to resolve, right? How many do you go after? Do you go after, 1 billion? Do you go after 1,000? Right? Perhaps if you go into a vertical, well, there's only, 1,000, there's only 1,000 hospitals that would need 3D something, immersive reality something, right? Whatever, right? Or maybe you go after a component play and there's only 4, right? And that's the challenge these days for technology introduction. It's something that other sectors are extremely used to, and we are not. And the sector that is used to is the pharmaceutical discovery market, the biotech firms, right? The biotech firms understand there is no way you can come up with a new drug and effectively have that drug go into the patient's hand, be delivered to patients. It doesn't work that way, no. Right? No biotech company ever sells anything, right? This is the most important truth to understand about the business in the biotech world is biotech companies never actually sell drugs. They sell themselves as a company to another company that will then bring the drugs to the market. Because once you de-risk the innovation, then there are other companies who are actually not in the business of coming up with new drugs. They don't really like it when you say it that way because they also do their own drugs, right? But really, they're also in the business of shopping around for biotech companies that they can buy, right? And so that's the nature of the innovation landscape that is ahead of us. And I think one of the things that's kind of most interesting is the fact that it's shifting and it's changing, and there are new rules being written every decade at least.
Yeah. So is that connected to what I talked about when I talked about connecting purposes, trying to link into what? Yeah.
I might complete my answer with something that could be interesting for you, because what happened recently is that we saw that our technology could have huge applications in the vision care market. So instead of waiting for the big spatial computing revolution, everybody manufacturing smart glasses, we might be able to innovate an industry that it's really slow and uses technologies from 200 years ago. And when you go try and measure your prescription lenses, you have a doctor changing yes or no, better or worse. So our technology had the potential to innovate that specific part of the industry that somehow will be related and might reinforce the acceptance of smart glasses in the futures, because smart glasses might be something more than consumer electronics, but something between consumer electronics and a biomedical device. So we hope to be well positioned for that time, also through these other business unit that we are growing.
Okay, that's good. Anyone else wants to chip into the discussion? No?
Thank you. Yes, when I'm hearing that is really, now it comes the role of innovation parks. How can we support this challenge, okay? And what we see more and more is, okay, we were pioneers 30 years ago with Innovation Park at EPFL. We're thinking now about what is the future of innovation parks. And I think what we see more and more is that we cannot solve a problem with one startup. It's more and more complex. And also finding the right customer, finding the right problem to solve with the technology. So what we are thinking about is what should be the future of this innovation park or this innovation ecosystem, what does it look like? And what we're thinking about and also trying to make real is connecting in an unstructured way different partners and extending the partners we have. We're talking about regulation, we're talking about investors, also citizens to make understand and bring these together. The problem is it's not linear. It's an unstructured mesh, okay, where you have to be opportunistic, be open, and to be cross-pollinized from other ideas, and to be able to have these interactions to help you to find just this tiny element which helps you to move forward. And so what we're trying now is to bring these people together in a loose manner to make this happen, to support this and be even faster to move forward. And I think what will evolve over time is that companies will come, startups will come to this innovation park maybe for 6 months, for 1 year, to solve a problem, to move forward, move back, test the product, and come again with other challenges. And this will be more a moving and living organism than something which is quite rigid, would I say today, where companies are coming in a park and setting for 10, 15 years, will be more something which is much more dynamic, which supports really this need of finding the right model to move forward to make the next step.
So how do you get scientists to come?
Make the scientists come
to that discussion.
So one element which is let's say easy is the scientists sometimes want to have an impact on societies, have a great technology. So the best way to come to Innovation Park, of course, is to build your own startup, okay, to be able to make it to the market. What we try to do is more and more is maybe to have a discussion upfront to look if is a startup the right way to push the technology to the market? Can we maybe find other ways of using the technology which is coming out? And maybe more and more combining, because one technology is fine, but if you combine it with other elements which is maybe available, and also the core competencies of the company or companies, you have maybe more important impact. So we are getting more and more in contact early with the researchers to have this exchange and look how can we support and have an impact on the society in combining the technologies. Sometimes we have great element which is unique, we can push, but more and more I think is a combination of technology, combining researchers. We talk more about interdisciplinarity, which is not the core of a professor researcher. We have to be expert in one domain. So we try to make this interaction and have this open discussion. So it's kind of serendipity-like interaction, but supporting the transfer. Yeah.
So what about the uses of the technology? Because if I look at the tumor evolution project, I can see the strengths of having different technologies. So we got the Center for E-Research working together with the digital architects, if I can call you that. And then we got the medical staff and the genetic experts. So we got core disciplines collaborating, but not all knowing the technology, but some, having the problem, I guess, the medical side, and collaborating kind of from the start, not kicking off with technology, but kicking off with the problem. How do you work with that in the Innovation Park? Do you get kind of the user context or the people having these troubles coming to you and saying maybe
I don't know if it answers the question, but what we try more and more is when we are interacting with the company, we ask them to come with a challenge, with a big one.
Yeah.
Not with a specific problem, but what is the big challenge? What is the solar impulse? What is the alingi of the company? What is your vision on long term? And how can EPFL support this vision? Okay. And how can the ecosystem support this vision? So we see EPFL and ecosystem as a partner in the innovation process. Yeah. And then you can involve different partners in it at different times of the maturity of the product development and innovation. So maybe at the beginning it could be students, could be internships, could be a postdoc, a PhD, but it can also be startups which are maybe can play different role in it. and they make this happen. So we're trying to push more and more to not be too specific, we're tackling more the big challenges. And this is, I think, what is the force from EPFL. It's like we are focused on horizon 2 and 3. Okay, we are strong at this long vision and where the technology can support that, and not on the short term. Okay. That's why we need other partners in it to make it happen. I hope this.
No, do you want to? No. So, okay, you said. So I'm just looking at Luciano now and thinking. So what this whole thing of getting, how could perhaps working with 3D revolutionize education, for example? Is that part of a long-term purpose or not? Because how could we support, someone like Luciano? They have, from what I understand, the website is actually being used by quite a lot of people. Yeah, but you just said yourself you'd like to know more about how this actually works in the classroom, possibly. No?
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That is.
So let's okay. So we have got this. We have got a problem here. How would we do? What could we do to possibly create something around this? Is anyone? Yeah.
What I think is maybe very useful is that you already tried this proof of concept, make it happen, make the people experience it very early, and so we need place where you can just experiment and important is that it's not in a closed room, okay? So you need to show this to other partners around, okay? Because it can trigger others' interests from you're not thinking about, okay? So where we are thinking about is supporting these kind of ideas, giving the space to test and also give the audience to be aware of what is possible and trigger the discussion. And maybe sometimes you're now focusing on professors on education, but maybe somewhere another company, another domain is interested because it solves one problem they have at the moment and triggers other discussion. And again, it's important to have this open, and that's what we are focusing on. Is when we're expanding now, we are extending the innovation park. We're trying to make a new building around that. This building should support this kind of interaction. Should be visible to others and triggers ideas and nurture what is possible behind. I think it's important to make this happen. Yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering if it's time to open up to the floor. Is that right? Unless we have someone who wants to. Oh, have you got any questions from the? Yeah, someone back.
Excusez-moi, pour le monsieur de CREAL, le chercheur, monsieur le chercheur de CREAL. No, sorry, CREAL.
No,
sorry. I'm speaking French.
Exactly. No.
Sorry.
We are CREAL in the francophone countries. We are CREAL.
Sorry. Let's speak English. Sorry, I should have spoken English. It was so interesting that I got distracted. Yes, I was wondering. I find there's something slightly salacious and bawdy a bit in near perfect 3D, like in certain eras of history, it was considered salacious and bawdy to have images, just images of reality. So that's one thing. So don't you think that one day there's going to be some regulation on the power, enormous power of salaciousness and bawdiness that can be induced? For example, in Reunion Island in the 1917 elections, Monsieur Jean-Paul Mélenchon won many more seats, the representative of the Communist Party, LFI, because he appeared on Reunion Island at 10,000 kilometers from France in 3D at a huge political meetings. And he appeared in 3D, as one would say, in meetings all over France. And it estimated that he won a good amount of votes, more than the right. Not more, but it helped him enormously. So it's a very, 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 very powerful tool. Don't you think there's going to be some regulation at some moment?
Of course, but just to reassure you, display technology needs to evolve a lot more before we will have some digital content possibly indistinguishable by reality. And of course, every technological development brings some dark sides with it. And no. But thank you.
So I actually think your point that you're making is interesting in multiple levels, and I'll share two examples that immediately come to mind. One is, I did the demo myself, and it was in the context of people who are at Stanford studying the impact of virtual reality on from a human rights perspective and a torture perspective. And so it's a very simple experiment with a stupid, as much as you say they're not very realistic or effective. This is a very stupid, off-the-shelf Oculus. You put it on, and you're in a room, and you see the room, and and I was perfectly awake, no medication or anything, right? You're in a room, and you have directions to walk 10 steps in one direction. So you put the thing on, you walk 10 steps. And then the guy tells you to turn 180 degrees, and you turn a degree, and then the floor just drops below you, right? And you have a wooden plank, and you have to walk the 10 steps back on the wooden plank, and there's 30 meters of a drop between both sides of the plank, right? And I think the statistics is like 35% of people just block and actually cannot walk, right? Because the brain is confused, right? So the brain can be, digital, physical, the physical world has a certain set of built-in assumptions about velocity, kinetics, right? And yeah, sure, we're confused if we're in a car accident, so we're completely confused, but otherwise we are not confused as our brains. And then the digital world can manipulate ourselves, and this is our brain, right? And extremely quickly to the point where we're completely confused because half of my brain says, of course I can walk through it because it's fake, right? That's obviously virtual reality. And it doesn't even look like that realistic, right? And then of course the other half of my brain is saying, well, wow, if I fall, right? What happens if I lose my balance? So it's a story about the fact that these technologies have a huge impact on the cognitive aspect.
Yeah, and if I might complete, no, it's interesting. Maybe it's not more about it. It's not about realism, but about maybe immersivity. Yes, immersive content can be really impactful, and there is a threshold value that is around 120 degrees of field of view, beyond which you start interacting with parts of our brain cortex that are linked to spatial perception, and many things changes. Even retention of information changes substantially. So yes, I was distracted by you mentioning realism, but if we talk about immersive content, immersive spaces, and that, yes, that should be definitely be regulated because they can be highly they can manipulate people very effectively.
Of course, 3D could be very impactful or maybe dangerous, which requires regulations. But first thing, one would like to have standards, possibly for science. VRML was one of these standards, and then there are a series of others, I believe. But it looks like, to me, it looks like a zoological garden, Here we have this blue, red linnets, and there were Silicon Graphics active shutter displays, which were very complicated, maybe, and there is your approach, possibly, which will beat all of these Is there any standard emerging, or even a standard for stereo television?
No, it's really interesting because standards are super important, and they are trying to go against what happens, what comes from the concentration in 3 or 4 companies in United States mainly, or maybe in China, that have the monopoly on these technical developments. And for example, in CREAL, we fully support the so-called OpenXR standard. So we can receive 3D and color information from every source or rendering engine, and we will be just detected like one of the many displays. So yes, we fully understand the importance of standards, and we support the OpenXR standard.
Yeah. Okay, I think this actually nicely lands in that responsibilities bullet point, that we will have responsibilities when it comes to engaging and developing these new technologies and tools. I think we have to stop. I've had some clear indications from, but yeah. Yeah, if there's some more comments, that's allowed.
On the responsibility side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we perhaps close with this. So we always revisit history through analogies, and these analogies are far from perfect, right? And there's this the story that is coming back these days about like how when people invented the steam engine was developed, the fundamental laws of mechanics and physics and thermodynamics were not fully developed, and so there were a bunch of steam engines that exploded in flight or underground because we didn't really know how to build safe steam engines, right? And then others came around, and now we have a much better understanding of how to build safe steam engines, right? It took a while, it took decades to go, a few decades together. We are now in a world where with every decade, the gap between our understanding of the fundamental scientific properties and the emergent properties of the technology that is deployed and the rate of deployment of those technologies increases, right? It's always clear that our ability to scientifically understand the impact is delayed, right? We need a little bit of perspective to understand. And innovation goes into the market. Most things that go to market have zero impact, so no one cares. Some have impact, and then eventually you figure it out. But the gap is growing, right? And now we're introducing technologies faster and faster with less and less proactive evaluation on the safety of these technologies. In fact, no evaluation of the safety of these technologies. No independent protocols to evaluate the safety of these technologies. And these technologies got adopted. ChatGPT was adopted by, 100 million people in 22 days or some number. And this was not tested. So now we're in this mode where we are bringing technologies to the market and expecting that the operators of these very massive technology cycles are monitoring it for safety or not. And of course, right, it's always after the fact that you determine whether something is safe or not safe. So I agree with the point about responsibilities. I think there's two separate things. There's the responsibility of scientists. And the good news is nothing that we do here is directly, I mean, perhaps some things are perhaps more dangerous than others, but it's, the people that gave us atomic physics, right, had a direct responsibility. You go from understanding the physics to like building a bomb, right? The current technology trends and everything that you're being describing, right, is not inherently dangerous and lethal, right? It is the platformization of those technologies at massive scale that is not understood. So it's not a raw scientific problem. It's much more of a societal / economic problem that we are facing. And it is something that somehow, at some point, we will have to be responsible for as a society and as scholars in general, collectively, that we need to take account of.
Maybe just to build on that is really...
A quick comment.
Very, very short is really... we're talking about innovation ecosystem, this discussion should be part of it. Okay, we cannot have two different discussions. These should be elements of the discussion we have when we're talking about technology, innovation, social impact. This should be this discussion which is important, which is today quite separated, and it should not be anymore the case. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming and thank you for staying.